In 2020, this video by a 19-year-old would later become one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence in a triple homicide case.
I'll be in the parent button.
In that video, the father allegedly described what happened as a disciplinary act. But years later, 3 of the people seen in that same clip, the mother and her 2 young children, would be found dead. The story grabbed national headlines because from the outside, this family seemed perfect. The father was a respected medical physician. They lived comfortably in a beautiful home, a smiling wife, wonderful twins, the kind of family everyone admired. But perfect families don't usually end up at the center of a murder case. And if everything really was as flawless as it appeared, we wouldn't be digging through records and timelines, trying to piece together what went wrong. So what actually happened behind those doors? That's exactly what we're going to uncover in this video.
It's like a bad, bad nightmare that you wish you could wake up from. One minute you're mad, the next you're sad, crying, just every emotion you could think of.
Before we get into the details of what happened, I want you to know who Charity Beales actually was, because she was not just a victim in a headline. She was a real person with a full life, a sense of humor, people who loved her, and dreams for her children.
A good Christian woman that loved her children and loved her family and friends more than anything. But she always put God first. And I'm grateful for that, because I know where she is now.
Charity was 40 years old. She had grown up in the Fort Smith area of Arkansas, a stretch of small communities along the Arkansas-Oklahoma border where people know their neighbors and take care of their own. She had an older son named John Powell from a previous relationship. John is 24 years old now. By every account, he and his mother were deeply close. He admired her. He worried about her. And in the years of her marriage, he watched things get worse and worse and felt largely powerless to stop it. In 2015, Charity married Dr. Randall Beallis. He was a family medicine doctor, the kind of doctor who sees whole families, who treats kids for ear infections, and parents for blood pressure, and grandparents for everything in between. He had been licensed to practice medicine in Arkansas for nearly 2 decades. He also held licenses in Florida and Illinois at different points in his career. To the outside world, he was a respected professional, someone his patients trusted, someone who, on paper, looked like exactly the kind of man a woman would feel safe building a life with. But Charity's family says the picture inside that marriage looked nothing like the one on the outside, and they have the paperwork to prove it. Charity's father, Randy Powell, and her son, John, have both spoken publicly about what they witnessed and what Charity told them over the years.
She shot through the chest and then in the head.
And them babies are shot through the chest. That means one of them babies had to watch the other one, or however it went down.
Or maybe they watched their mother die, and then one of them got to watch the other one die.
They say she was beaten until her eyes were swollen shut and black, that her body was covered in bruises, that for 10 years, a full decade, she lived inside a marriage that, by her own family's account, was a constant state of danger. Now, I want to be clear about something important. Randall Beallis has not been charged with murder. He is not an official suspect as of the time this video was made. His attorney has stated publicly that he did not kill his wife or children and that he is cooperating with investigators. In this country, every person is innocent until proven guilty, and we are going to respect that here. But the facts, the ones that exist in court records, medical board documents, and official police reports, paint a picture that is impossible to look away from. So let's go through them together. The documented history of this family goes back years before the murders. In 2020, when Charity's oldest son John was just 19 years old, something happened that ended up on video. Randall and Charity were both accused of slashing the tires on John's truck. The whole confrontation was caught on camera. In the footage, you can see Randall holding a knife, slashing each tire one by one while a baby is nearby. John is filming and standing his ground, asking what is happening to his truck, a truck that was in his name.
Give me your phone. I'm shutting it off.
Here comes the next one. Yeah. What are you gonna do? I'll be in the parent button.
My truck in my name.
Yep.
I paid for it.
Yep.
Give me that phone.
Randall pleaded no contest to misdemeanor criminal mischief for that incident. His punishment? A 1-year suspended sentence. No jail time, no real consequences. And John Powell, Charity's son, says that moment was not a one-off. He says he lived in genuine fear of the man his mother had married. In fact, on February 16, 2025, Things crossed a line that could no longer be quietly explained away. That night, Randall Beallis choked his wife. He did not do it in private. He did not wait until the children were asleep or out of the room. He choked Charity in front of their 6-year-old twins. 2 small children, a boy and a girl, watched their father put his hands around their mother's throat. Randall was arrested that night. The charges filed against him were serious: aggravated assault on a family member, 3rd-degree domestic battery, and 2 counts of 3rd-degree endangering the welfare of a minor. Those last 2 counts existed specifically because those children were present when it happened. Obviously, Charity filed for divorce in March 2025. After what had just happened, it is hard to imagine she felt she had any other choice. She wanted out. She wanted full custody of her twins. She wanted her children safe. And then she started doing something that I think shows exactly who she was as a person. She started fighting back through every system available to her. In April 2025, Charity sent an email to the Arkansas State Medical Board. In it, she explained that she and her children had undergone extensive interviews at a nearby child advocacy center. She told the board that the Arkansas State Police Crimes Against Children Division had been informed of pending child abuse charges against her husband. She was not just trying to protect herself. She was trying to use every official tool available to her to make sure her children were protected. She also went directly to a state senator. Arkansas State Senator Terry Rice later confirmed publicly that Charity had met with him in person earlier in 2025. She sat in his office and told him, face to face, that she was scared for her life, that she was afraid of what her husband might do to her. A woman walked into an elected official's office and said, "I believe he is going to kill me." Senator Rice confirmed this conversation after her death. In October 2025, 8 months after the choking incident, Randall Beallis went to court, and the outcome was something that Charity could not stay quiet about. Through negotiations with Sebastian County Prosecuting Attorney Daniel Shue, all of the original charges were reduced. The aggravated assault charge? Gone. The child endangerment counts, the charges that existed because those babies were in the room? Gone. What was left was a single misdemeanor, 3rd-degree domestic battery. His sentence, 1 year, suspended, plus fines totaling just over $1,500. He walked out of that courthouse a free man. No prison, no felony record. His medical license is completely untouched. He could still walk into an exam room the very next day and see patients. Charity had been trying for months to get the prosecuting attorney to even read a letter she had written. She had reached out to his office and been turned away, and when the plea deal was announced, she did not go silent. She went to the internet. In August 2025, before the plea was even officially done, Charity made a cryptic post sharing screenshots to an article titled, "If a partner has ever strangled you, they will likely kill you." If a woman's partner has ever strangled her, even once, her risk of being murdered by that same partner with a gun shoots up 750% compared to a woman who has never been strangled. A Daily Press article shared by Charity states, it was becoming obvious who she was speaking out about, and by then, it was just as clear who had truly failed her. On December 2nd, 2025, Charity Beales walked into the Sebastian County Courthouse for what was meant to be the final hearing in her divorce case. At this point, she had been fighting that divorce for 9 months. She had a paper trail that stretched back years. She had documented abuse, a criminal conviction, medical board filings, and a direct conversation with a sitting state senator who would later confirm her fears on the record. She was seeking full custody of her twins. She believed, and had told people, that her children were not safe with their father. The judge awarded Randall Beallis joint custody. Charity went home that night knowing that the man she feared now had legal access to her children. That was December 2nd, 2025. The welfare check came on December 3rd, 2025, 1 day. That is all the time there was between that courthouse and that crime scene. 24 hours between a judge's ruling and a welfare check that found 3 people dead.
Are looking into the deaths of a mother and her 2 young children inside a Bonanza home.
Deputies say they're exploring every possibility, but the family of 40-year-old Charity Beales insist that she would never harm herself or her kids.
The Sebastian County Sheriff's Office released a statement confirming what deputies had found. 3 deceased individuals, a woman and 2 young children, all with apparent gunshot wounds. The bodies were transported to the Arkansas Crime Lab in Little Rock for official autopsies. The sheriff's office confirmed that search warrants had been written and executed, with more expected. Interviews were ongoing. Randall Beallis, they said, was cooperating with investigators. As of the initial news cycle, he had not been named a suspect. His attorney, Michael Pierce, released a statement to the New York Post. He said, "Mr. Beallis was not responsible for the death of Mrs. Beallis nor his children's deaths. Mr. Beallis has been cooperative with law enforcement and fully supports the Sebastian County Sheriff's Office investigation. We hope that the Sheriff's Office finds the truth about what happened to Mrs. Charity Beales and their children." That is his position, that is his right, and the investigation will determine what the evidence shows. But Charity's family did not wait for a careful legal statement. They spoke from grief, and they spoke plainly.
In the middle of his grief, John Powell says he's holding on to his mother's faith.
Remember her as a good Christian woman that loved her children and loved her family and friends more than anything. But she always put God first, and I'm grateful for that, because I know where she is now, in heaven.
Her father, Randy Powell, said, "One moment I'll be crying, and the next minute I'm mad. I don't even know how to explain it. I never expected to ever have to go through something like this in my life." John also said something about his mother that stopped me cold when I read it. He said she would have fought back, which he believed was why she may have been shot more than once. She would have fought tooth and nail. That is who Charity Beales was, even at the very end. On December 4th, 2025, one single day after 3 bodies were discovered inside that home, Randall Beallis' attorney filed a legal motion in Sebastian County Court, a motion to dismiss the divorce case. Under Arkansas law, when one spouse dies during an ongoing divorce case, the proceedings cannot legally continue, so in a narrow technical sense, the filing was procedurally correct. But correct and appropriate are two very different things. The divorce had not been fully finalized at the time of Charity's death. The December 2nd hearing had been about custody. The complete legal dissolution of the marriage, including the formal division of assets, property, and finances, was still pending at the time she was killed. If the divorce case is dismissed rather than finalized, Randall Beallis' legal status changes. He is not a divorced man. He is a widower. And that distinction, widower versus divorced, carries real, significant financial and legal consequences under Arkansas law. Charity's family and their attorney are watching every single court filing in this case. They are not letting anything slide past without scrutiny. Because 3 days after the murders, on December 6, 2025, a woman in Fort Smith, Arkansas, was going through a dumpster. Fort Smith is roughly 15 miles from the Bonanza home where Charity and her twins died. She pulled out a large black garbage bag. Inside that bag, she found things that had no business being in a trash dumpster. Family photographs, framed portraits, handwritten notes, children's artwork, children's homework, medical paperwork with Charity Beales' name and address on it, a religious painting, and a gold necklace.
And new at 6 o'clock, new details on a shocking find from the very person who made the discovery. Pictures of Charity Beales and her children and other personal items found in a dumpster just days after their bodies were found shot to death in the River Valley.
Engraved with the names of the twins. The woman did not immediately connect what she was holding to the murders, but the following morning, after watching local news coverage of the case, she understood exactly what she had found. She called police. She turned over every single item. She led detectives directly to the dumpster. The Sebastian County Sheriff's Office confirmed they were investigating the discovery and working to determine who had placed those belongings in that dumpster and when. John Powell eventually met with the woman who found the bag. He was grateful she had come forward. But when Powell raised the discovery with an investigator, he said the response left him unsettled. According to Powell, the detective did not say, "Thank you," or "We are looking into it." Instead, the detective asked him, "How did you find out?" Powell found that question troubling. So do a lot of people who have been following this case. Now think about what was actually inside that bag. The children's homework, their artwork, things kids draw with crayons and bring home from school, the necklace engraved with their names. These are not things that get accidentally thrown away. These are not random items someone cleared out without thinking. These are the kinds of things that belong in a memory box, not a dumpster. The kinds of things a mother would have kept forever. Someone put them there deliberately, and investigators are working to figure out who and why. Now I need to tell you something that makes this case even more complicated. Because Charity Beales was not the only woman connected to Randall Beallis who died from a gunshot wound. He has been married 3 times. His first wife is still alive. His second wife was a woman named Shauna Jeanette Graham Beallis. Shauna was a registered nurse. She was 34 years old, still young, still building her life.
But let me ask you this. The first wife, Mark Garagos, died by gun violence. It's either a crazy coincidence or it is a pattern.
On January 5, 2012, Fort Smith police were called to the home that Randall and Shauna shared. When officers arrived at the door, Randall answered it. According to a report by KNWA, he told the officers she killed herself. Police went inside and found Shauna dead in the bedroom, with a gunshot wound to the forehead. Their report also noted something worth paying attention to. Furniture and other items were scattered throughout the home, signs of some kind of disturbance. Fort Smith police ruled the death a self-inflicted death. Shauna's family never accepted that ruling. They questioned it in 2012. They are loudly demanding answers now, in 2025, because the story has come back around in a way they cannot ignore. In 2021, 9 years after Shauna's death, Fort Smith police did reopen the case. What specifically prompted the reopening and what investigators found during that second look has not been fully made public. Here is what we also know, and this is a detail that was reported by the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette and is based on a police report. Charity's father, Randy Powell, had reportedly told police years earlier that Charity once told him something about Shauna's death. He later clarified that he had never said his daughter was involved, only that she knew who did it. That detail remains unresolved and unexplained. To be absolutely clear, Randall Beallis has never been charged in connection with Shauna's death. He is not a named suspect in that case. We are presenting this information because it is documented, because it is relevant to the ongoing investigation, and because Shauna's family deserves to have her story told. But when you step back and look at the full picture, 2 wives, 2 gunshot deaths, 13 years apart, both families now demanding answers at the same time. It is not something that investigators or anyone watching this can reasonably ignore. But sadly, that's not all that could possibly suggest the doctor may have been capable of doing something this horrific. Long before December 2025, there were documented warning signs. By the time investigators began taking a closer look at Dr. Randall Beallis, many were already questioning how so many red flags had been overlooked. Because when you trace it back, the concerns were not hidden, they were written down, filed, recorded. 5 News in Arkansas obtained records from the Arkansas State Medical Board, an 88-page file on Dr. Beallis. 88 pages is not a minor complaint. It is not a thin folder. It is a detailed record that tells a story, one that should have raised serious concern years earlier. The earliest documented issue dates back to January 2018. Mercy Hospital in Fort Smith reported that Beallis had prescribed Schedule II controlled narcotics, powerful, tightly regulated medications, to his own wife after surgery. Prescribing controlled substances to an immediate family member is considered a serious ethical violation in medicine. He wrote a letter to the board. He apologized. He promised it would never happen again. The board accepted his apology, and there was no meaningful discipline. Years later, in April 2025, after that reported choking incident, Charity Beales contacted the board herself. She told them about child advocacy interviews involving her children. She informed them that the Arkansas State Police had been notified regarding pending child abuse charges. She was direct. She was specific. She was asking the system to take the risk seriously. Then in October, Randall pleaded guilty to domestic battery. The board tabled it again. No further discussion was scheduled. His medical license remained active, set to expire in February 2027. An 88-page complaint file, a guilty plea for battering his wife, children interviewed in abuse investigations, and he was still legally practicing medicine up until the day his family was found dead. This case is bigger than one household in Arkansas. It raises serious questions about systems that move slowly when the warnings are urgent. Charity Beales followed nearly every step experts tell survivors to take. She documented the abuse. She contacted law enforcement. She pressed charges. She filed for divorce. She sought full custody. She submitted formal complaints. She attended hearings. She met with a senator. She spoke publicly and provided case numbers so her claims could be verified. At nearly every turn, the response was delay or reduction. Charges were lowered, sentences were suspended. The medical board waited. The court granted joint custody. Charity once wrote, "My voice, as the victim, has been shut out." 4 months before her death, she warned publicly that lives were at stake, including the lives of young children. Across the United States, an average of 3 women are killed every day by a current or former intimate partner. Research shows that the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is not at the beginning, but when the victim tries to leave. The risk increases. Charity knew that. She was living it. She was warning people. Again, as of the time this video is made, no arrests have been made in connection with the deaths of Charity Beales and her 2 children. The Sebastian County Sheriff's Office has described the investigation as active and ongoing. Search warrants have been executed, evidence has been collected, but Charity's oldest son continues to push for accountability, reviewing court filings and speaking publicly to keep her name from fading. Her father grieves with a heartbreak that does not disappear. The case remains open. Sadly, this isn't the first time a father has snapped after failing to keep up a perfect image. In another case we covered, a man killed his wife and children because the pressure became too much. But this time the details are even more disturbing and far more bizarre than anything we've seen before.
I'm wondering if somebody can do a wellness check on my brother and his family.
In January 2020, federal agents knocked on the door of a luxury rental home in Celebration, Florida, a town literally built by Disney, where every street looks like something from a storybook. When the door opened, the man who answered was shaking uncontrollably. He mumbled that his wife was sleeping and his kids were at a friend's house. But something was wrong. The officers could smell it before they even stepped inside.
Tony, you coming downstairs? All right. Tony, you upstairs? Everything's all right, man. Just stay calm. Any children here?
I can't remember if they went to sleep last night.
What they discovered upstairs would become one of the most disturbing family annihilation cases in Florida history. Anthony Tott, a respected physical therapist, soccer coach, and father of 3, had been living with the decomposing bodies of his entire family for weeks. And when investigators asked him why, his answer would change multiple times. Before we go further into this case that shook the Disney community to its core, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. These stories matter, and sharing them helps keep the victims' memories alive and reminds us all to stay vigilant about the people closest to us. From the outside, the Tott family appeared to have it all. Anthony and Megan Tott had moved to Celebration, Florida in 2017 with their 3 children, 13-year-old Alec, 11-year-old Tyler, and 4-year-old Zoe. They also had a beloved dog named Breezy. If you're unfamiliar with Celebration, picture this. It's a master-planned community created by the Walt Disney Company in the 1990s. Wide sidewalks, pristine lawns, homes that look like they belong on a postcard. It's just minutes from Disney World, and residents often describe it as living in a real-life fairy tale. The Tots fit right in. Megan, who was 42, devoted herself entirely to their children. She homeschooled all 3, a full-time commitment that meant she was with them every single day. Friends described her as nurturing, organized, and deeply involved in her kids' education and activities. Little Zoe was energetic and curious, always asking questions. Tyler enjoyed reading and playing piano. Alec, the eldest, was thoughtful and mature for his age. Anthony, 46, worked as a physical therapist. His job required him to travel back to Connecticut during the week, where he maintained a practice. But on weekends, he returned to Celebration and coached youth soccer. Neighbors described him as friendly, engaged, and seemingly devoted to his family. The Tots were well-dressed, always polite, and appeared to be living comfortably in one of the most sought-after communities in Central Florida. But like any family annihilations we've encountered, beneath those polished surfaces, there's always cracks that have been forming for years. In 1929, federal investigators began looking into Anthony's physical therapy practice in Connecticut, and what they discovered was systematic fraud. It turns out, Anthony had been billing Medicaid and private insurance companies for treatments that never happened. Patients would come in for one session, and Anthony would bill for multiple visits. Some of the charges were for services provided to people who had never even stepped foot in his office. The stolen money, tens of thousands of dollars, had been funding the Tots lifestyle, the beautiful rental home in Celebration, frequent trips to Disney World, private homeschooling materials. All of it was built on lies. But the fraud investigation was just the beginning. Investigators also uncovered that Anthony had taken out high-interest loans from firms in New York City, borrowing more and more to cover mounting expenses. When he couldn't repay, the firms filed lawsuits. By late 2019, Anthony owed nearly $200,000. The pressure was crushing him. Now it's important to note that despite the fraud charges, Anthony wasn't immediately arrested. He was allowed to continue working while the investigation proceeded. But back in Celebration, the financial strain was becoming impossible to hide. The family began missing rent payments on their home. In December 2019, an eviction notice appeared on their front door. It was around this time that Anthony sent a message to Megan's family. He told them the Tots were going on an extended holiday and wouldn't be in contact for a while. At first, no one questioned it. The family traveled often, and it wasn't unusual for them to take time away. But as the days turned into weeks, and Christmas came and went without a word from Megan, her relatives began to worry. Megan never missed Christmas. She loved the holidays. She would call, text, send photos of the kids. But in that year, there was nothing. Complete silence. By mid-December, Megan's family was calling and texting constantly. One neighbor, seeing the eviction notice still taped to the door, reached out to Megan directly. She received a brief, strange reply. Nothing like the warm conversational messages Megan usually sent. Something was very wrong. Megan's relatives contacted local authorities, requesting a wellness check. They explained that the family had been unreachable for weeks, that Megan would never go this long without contact, especially around the holidays. But initially, the police didn't act. There were no immediate signs of danger, no reports of violence, and technically, the Tots were free to travel or disconnect if they chose. Then, in early January 2020, an FBI agent involved in the fraud investigation against Anthony grew concerned. He hadn't been able to reach Anthony either. Phone calls went unanswered. Emails bounced back. The agent contacted the Osceola County Sheriff's Office, urging them to locate Anthony Tot. This time, authorities took the matter seriously. On January 13, 2020, federal agents and sheriff's deputies arrived at the Tot home on Reserve Place to execute an arrest warrant for the fraud charges. They rang the doorbell. After a long pause, Anthony answered.
Tony Tot!
Police!
Tony, come to the door. Tony, you coming downstairs? All right. Tony, you upstairs? Hey, come downstairs, bud. Everything's all right, man. Just stay calm. Any children here?
I can't remember if they went to the sleepover last night.
He was visibly shaking. His clothes were disheveled. When officers asked where his wife and children were, he mumbled that the kids were at a friend's sleepover and that Megan was upstairs, sleeping. But his body language, his trembling hands, the way he avoided eye contact, everything about his demeanor set off alarm bells. The officers made the decision to search the home. Part of the reason was because the moment they stepped inside, they were hit with an overpowering odor. It was the unmistakable smell of decomposition. They climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, and what they found there was beyond comprehension.
I didn't see Megan because she was, the way her blanket was.
You saw the children?
Yeah.
All right. They're all pretty much black.
The two boys, I just saw Zoe's hair.
Okay.
But yes, the two boys are as black as this leather. There's also a dog, so just there may be another deceased.
Megan, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe were all dead. Their bodies, wrapped in blankets, were found in the upstairs bedroom. The family dog, Breezy, was also deceased. The state of decomposition indicated they had been dead for weeks, possibly since late December. The medical examiner would later determine that all 4 family members had dangerously high levels of Benadryl in their systems. Empty bottles of the over-the-counter medication were scattered throughout the house, on nightstands, bathroom counters, and kitchen surfaces. Toxicology reports would show levels far exceeding any therapeutic dose, indicating deliberate poisoning. The medication, commonly used for allergies and sleep aid, had been administered in quantities that would have caused extreme sedation. Forensic analysis revealed that except for little Zoe, each victim had suffered multiple stab wounds. However, the medical examiner's report contained a crucial finding. The wounds were likely inflicted after death. This detail suggested a staged scene, an attempt to create a specific narrative about what had occurred. The actual causes of death involved a combination of the drugging and suffocation, though the advanced decomposition made some determinations challenging. Investigators collected numerous pieces of physical evidence. They found the weapons used, processed them for fingerprints and DNA, and documented their locations. They examined bedding, clothing, and personal items. They analyzed residue patterns and biological evidence. Every piece of the puzzle was carefully preserved and cataloged. One of the most heartbreaking details emerged from the crime scene photos. Alec, the eldest son, was found clutching rosary beads in his hand. This single image spoke volumes about those final moments. A young man seeking comfort in faith, holding on to something sacred as his world ended. The rosary beads, a symbol of prayer and protection, remained entwined in his fingers long after he passed. There were also signs that at least one of the older boys had tried to fight back. Investigators noted a visible scratch on Anthony's neck at the time of his arrest, along with blisters and cuts on his hands. Defensive wounds are common in violent crimes, and these marks told investigators that the victims had not gone peacefully. Someone had struggled. Someone had fought for their life. The forensic team also analyzed the timeline based on decomposition rates, temperature records, and the last known communications from the household. They determined the deaths had likely occurred in late December, around the time Anthony had told Megan's family they were going on holiday. The final text messages sent from Megan's phone were examined, brief, uncharacteristic responses that investigators now believed had been sent by Anthony himself, creating the illusion that his wife was still alive. And then there was Anthony himself. According to the evidence collected and witness statements, he had been living in that house with those bodies for approximately 3 weeks. Neighbors reported seeing him occasionally leave to buy alcohol and food at nearby stores. One neighbor mentioned seeing him take out the trash. Another recalled a brief conversation where Anthony seemed distracted and disheveled but offered no explanation. He had turned off his phone, cutting off communication with the outside world. He stopped responding to messages from family, friends, and even federal investigators looking into his fraud case. He simply existed in that home, moving through the downstairs rooms while his entire family remained upstairs, their bodies slowly decomposing in the Florida heat despite the air conditioning he kept running. When asked later why he didn't call for help, why he didn't report what had happened, Anthony would offer varying explanations, none of which made sense to investigators. He had been seen at local stores, walking the streets of Celebration, even driving his vehicle. At any point, he could have contacted authorities, sought help, or at minimum, left the home. But he chose to stay, day after day, living with the consequences of his actions. And when detectives questioned Anthony, his initial story was both bizarre and chilling. He claimed that Megan had become obsessed with apocalyptic beliefs and was convinced that the world was ending. He said she had been suffering from chronic health issues, Lyme disease, liver problems, and was in constant pain. According to Anthony, Megan believed that the family should leave this world together to avoid suffering.
Tell me what happened.
My wife is, I want to say, chronically ill. The liver issues and all that kind of stuff. And what was told to me is that when people die, they go to different aspects. And then sometimes never meet up in the light energy aspect. Friday night, it was supposed to be a three-step plan. So that we all stay together and go up. One person separated from the other.
He described in disturbing detail how the family had allegedly discussed this plan together. He claimed that Megan had explained everything to their sons, preparing them for what was to come.
You murdered your 3 children.
I know.
You take full responsibility for that?
I don't take full responsibility. Meg was involved, but I don't take full responsibility.
Well, Megan's dead. Where we're at right now is a very sad state. All 3 of your children are dead.
I know.
Your wife is dead.
I know.
You're alive.
Unfortunately.
When asked how he killed his family, this was the chilling response he gave.
She rolled and started squiggling, and I put my hand over her mouth and then put a pillow over top of her. She started to fade away, and I just held that until there was no motion left.
So Zoe's gone, and then what happens?
We go into Alex's room. We're just in there, just eyeing each other, just gaining the confidence. I stabbed him, and he started kicking, was trying to get up, and I reached around with my hand and held his nose in his mouth. We decided that the dog, we went the dog with us, and I was able to hold the knot in her snout and her nose closed, and she went peacefully.
Anthony then told investigators that Megan had harmed herself but didn't pass, and that she begged him to help her. He said he suffocated her with a pillow.
Meg wanted to go. Gave her the knife, and I laid next to her, and she put the knife into her stomach. We were laying there for about 45 minutes. After she stabbed herself, she says, I feel nothing happening. So she decided to go through her liver.
But even as he confessed, Anthony insisted that he had also tried to harm himself multiple times, using knives, zip ties around his neck, and large amounts of Benadryl, but couldn't go through with it.
We didn't get there till, Monday. What were you doing during this time frame? We're talking over 2 weeks.
Trying to kill myself. I tried the razor blade zip tie around the neck, was trying to figure out how to go through and fall the knife in the right direction. In all honesty, I chickened out and cowered it out with a knife.
The entire interview is truly bone-chilling, especially seeing how effortlessly Todt described the murders without showing even the slightest hint of remorse. What's even more disturbing is that he later claimed he would take full responsibility simply because he wanted it done, an attitude that is nothing short of infuriating.
You've upset a lot of people. You guys seem very planned. This is very methodical. Other than the fact about you taking your own life, which I'm still kind of questioning. You take full
responsibility once it's done.
Okay.
If I could decide right now, I would.
Okay, well, we're not going to let you do that.
Then, weeks later, Anthony's story changed completely. In a handwritten letter to his father, he now claimed that Megan was responsible for everything. He alleged that she had drugged the children by spiking their pudding with Benadryl, then stabbed them. When he confronted her, he said, "She harmed herself." He claimed he was simply a witness to a tragedy he couldn't stop. This new version contradicted everything he had told detectives during his initial confession.
This was a personal catastrophe in everybody's life in my family, including myself. I maintain my innocence. I provided for my wife, did everything I could for my wife. She was progressively sick over the years. There were days which were worse, days which were better. She was kept on a pedestal from me. My kids I did everything for them. The weight gain, Ms. Kopko has said, was because I negated myself. 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night because I would be treating my wife, doing for my wife, flying back and forth. I appreciated her medical concerns, and the reason why I would call so much is because Megan would have bad days, and I just needed to know she was okay. It wasn't a control factor. It wasn't any kind of scoping things out or whatnot. It was my fear that something was wrong with her, and I just needed to hear her voice making sure she was okay.
But for investigators, it didn't matter which story was true. The forensic evidence was clear. Anthony Todt had murdered his family. As the investigation continued, a clearer picture of Anthony's life began to emerge. His past was marked by trauma that some believed might have shaped his actions. In March 1980, when Anthony was just 4 years old, someone broke into his family's home in Pennsylvania and shot his mother, Loretta. According to reports, young Anthony heard his mother screaming before the gunshot. She survived but lost her left eye. Anthony's father, Robert Todt, was later charged with attempted murder. Prosecutors alleged that he had hired a former student to carry out the shooting so he could be with his mistress. Robert was convicted and served time in prison, though he has always maintained his innocence. Anthony's sister, Chrissy Caplet, later reflected on how that childhood trauma might have affected her brother. "There's only so much trauma a young kid can take," Robert Tott said in an interview. But Chrissy was clear. Trauma could never excuse what Anthony did. "I never thought my brother could do this, not in a million years," she said. Beyond the trauma, there was the fraud. By the time of the murders, Anthony was facing serious federal charges. He had stolen from patients, insurance companies, and lenders. His entire life was built on deception, and when it all came crashing down, he saw no way out, except one. Anthony Tott's trial began in April 2022, more than 2 years after his arrest. The courtroom in Osceola County was packed with media, members of Megan's family, and community members who had followed the case since the horrific discovery. Over the course of 6 days, prosecutors methodically built their case, presenting evidence that painted a damning portrait of a man who had annihilated his entire family and then tried to rewrite the narrative to save himself. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: Anthony's detailed confessions captured on video, forensic reports showing Benadryl toxicity and stab wounds, crime scene photographs, and the undeniable fact that he had lived with the bodies for weeks without calling for help. Lead prosecutor Danielle Pinnell walked the jury through a timeline that left little room for doubt. She presented phone records showing that Anthony had been the last person to send messages from Megan's phone. She showed receipts proving he had been purchasing alcohol and food while his family lay deceased upstairs. She displayed the empty Benadryl bottles found throughout the home and explained how the medication had been used to sedate the victims. Medical examiners testified about their findings, carefully explaining the toxicology results and the nature of the wounds. Digital forensic experts presented evidence from Anthony's computer and phone, including searches he had made in the weeks leading up to the murders. Neighbors took the stand, describing Anthony's strange behavior in the days after the deaths, how he had been seen leaving the house, appearing disheveled, but offering no explanation for his family's absence. Anthony's defense team faced an uphill battle. They tried to suppress his initial confessions, arguing that he was in severe emotional distress and not thinking clearly when he spoke to investigators. His attorneys claimed that the interrogation had been coercive and that Anthony had been manipulated into making false statements. They also attempted to argue that the bodies were too decomposed to conclusively determine cause of death, suggesting that reasonable doubt existed about exactly what had happened in that bedroom. But the prosecution countered with a devastating series of questions that cut to the heart of Anthony's changing story. If Megan was truly responsible, as Anthony later claimed, why didn't he call the police immediately? Why didn't he intervene to save his children? Why did he stay in that house for weeks, living among the remains of his family, buying groceries and alcohol as if nothing had happened? Why did he turn off his phone and avoid all contact with the outside world? And perhaps most damning of all, why did his story change so dramatically between his initial confession and his later claims? The defense had no satisfactory answers. Anthony himself took the stand, attempting to explain his actions, but his testimony only reinforced the inconsistencies in his narrative. He appeared detached at times, struggling to maintain eye contact with jurors. When pressed about specific details, his answers contradicted earlier statements he had made. Despite his claims of innocence and his attempts to blame Megan, the jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning a verdict. On April 14, 2022, Anthony Tott was found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of animal cruelty for the death of the family dog, Breezy. As the verdict was read aloud, Anthony stood motionless, showing little visible emotion. The judge sentenced him to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional year for animal cruelty. The consecutive nature of the sentences meant that even if one conviction were somehow overturned, Anthony would still spend the rest of his life behind bars. His father, Robert, immediately criticized the verdict in a statement to the press, arguing that his son's confession should not have been trusted and that the case had been mishandled from the beginning. But for the community of celebration, for Megan's family who had sat through every moment of the trial, and for everyone who had followed this case from the beginning, the verdict represented justice. 4 innocent lives had been taken, and the person responsible would be held accountable. The Todd case left the town of Celebration shaken. This was a place designed to be safe, idyllic, a refuge from the outside world. And yet, inside one of its picture-perfect homes, a father had annihilated his entire family and lived among their bodies for weeks. Megan's relatives spoke publicly about their grief, describing a woman who was devoted to her children, who loved life, and who would never have willingly participated in any plan to harm her family. They rejected Anthony's claims entirely, calling them a desperate attempt to shift blame onto the one person who couldn't defend herself. As for Anthony, he remains incarcerated in Florida, still insisting on his evolving versions of events. But the facts don't change. The evidence doesn't lie. And for the 3 children who lost their lives, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe, and for Megan, who dedicated her life to raising them, there is no happy ending. Only the memory of what was and the devastating reality of what one man chose to destroy. The Tott family tragedy is a reminder that darkness can hide behind even the most perfect facades. Financial desperation, unchecked mental health struggles, and a willingness to prioritize self-preservation over the lives of others. These factors combine to create an unthinkable horror. If there's anything we can take from this case, it's the importance of staying connected to the people we love. Megan's family raised the alarm when they stopped hearing from her. Neighbors noticed the eviction notice and reached out. These small acts of concern mattered, even though they came too late to save the Tott family. They serve as a reminder that we all have a responsibility to look out for one another. Now I want to hear your thoughts. How could this tragedy have been prevented? What responsibility does society have to intervene when financial or mental health crises reach this level? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you found this case as deeply troubling as we did, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. We cover cases like this to honor the victims, to educate, and to ensure that their stories are never forgotten. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.